Okay, good afternoon and welcome everybody to our final agroecology workshop for the year on seed saving and indigenous seed and food. I'm Jane Cherry from the Cooperative and Policy Alternative Centre, and who is an active partner in the South African Food Sovereignty Campaign, and together COPAC and SATSI are bringing you this workshop series on closing the loop. Our previous workshops in this series covered food forests and land management, waste management and water management. And if you missed those, we have recorded them and uploaded them to YouTube. And so Courtney, if you would please share those links in the chat. For those who didn't manage to see them, you can simply follow those links in the chat that Courtney will share shortly. So as I said, today's program is on indigenous seed and also seed saving. So we're going to start off with the presentation, which has been pre-recorded by John Nzira. And then after that, we have Zayaan Khan joining us, who will speak about reclaiming indigenous seed and food. So welcome, Zayaan. It's really great to have you with us. So this workshop series has been about closing the loop. Our first series that we had early in the year was on how to set up your food garden. And so we really hope that you are, as this is our last workshop, we hope that you are really beginning to put into practice what you've learned in the previous workshops, and that you are getting closer to closing the loop in your food gardens or in your small community farms. And we also hope that you will contribute to the food commons by listing your food gardens or food commons initiatives on our food commons map. And Courtney will also share that link in the chat. We are really hoping that you will list your food commons. This is a map where we have encouraged people, we established it in the beginning of the year, we encourage people to list any food initiative that they have. So whether it's a small scale farm, a pave yard garden, a backyard garden, a community farm, even a soup kitchen or a feeding scheme, please list those there. And we want to see where the food commons are to start developing a picture. But also start making the necessary connections and scaling up some of these initiatives where possible. And just some housekeeping. So I shared this in the beginning, but I'll just quickly run through it. Please use the chat if you have any questions. We're going to have the two presentations, and then we will have the question and answer session at the end. So if you have any questions along the way, please write them in the chat and we will try and address them. We are recording all the workshops and we will upload them to YouTube, and we will send it out to everyone who has registered for this webinar on Zoom. It is also live streaming on Facebook at SA Food Sovereignty, so it will immediately be available on Facebook as well after this event. And then we've set up an agroecology advice panel. So if you have any questions as you are still setting up your garden or closing the loop, please drop us an email. We'll be able to share the contacts of that advice panel, and you'll be able to WhatsApp them with any questions that you may have along the process. And that's all from me. I'm just going to check the chat. Okay, Courtney has shared all those links there. Thank you, Courtney. And so I'm going to now, as I said, John pre-recorded his session just so that we don't have any connection issues. So I'm going to share that recording, and then after that, we will have Zayaan's input. Okay.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Today we are going to talk about seed saving, but as we talk about seed saving, we need to acknowledge our farmers. They've been keeping seeds from local farmers from long time, collecting seed, conserving seeds, and exchange local seed varieties for millennia, which means about seeds. It is the heritage from our ancestors, from our traditional, from our history, from our forefathers. So when we talk about this, we need to look a little bit about the past, what has been happening. For example, the farmer-led seed system and peace, it has been creating a system that's strengthening the local people and living in harmony among themselves. So seed has been able to unite people and able to link people and families and create identities. So seed and life, it has been like saving seed. It's all about saving life. And sharing seed, it's all about looking at passing knowledge from one generation to generation. So seed is also seen as an identity by our local farmers, and it is also seen as part of the culture, part of the tradition. It's connected to spiritual being and create unity and diverse in terms of knowledge sharing and local knowledge sharing, and in terms of diverse of species. So seed has been a pillar in the past that it helps people to live together. Seed availability and accessibility. Looking at the past, the farmer-led system or farmer seeds, you'll find that seeds were available and accessible. Whenever you need a type of seed, you could go or know village A, village B can provide certain type of millet, certain type of seeds. So it has been so easy. But with the industrial agriculture, there comes confusion, and the confusion made us to lose our seeds. And this is important that we need to know our seeds have been lost because of the industrial agriculture. So seed for colonization is in the 1600s, the settlers, they started by forcing people to grow the food they were used to grow the food they like, and like maize. That's when it was started to be introduced. And then the local seed like millet, it was wiped out. Again, in the 1950s, with the Green Revolution, it also pushed the local seeds away. Even now, with the Bill and Melinda Gates programs, Rockefeller and other organizations, they are also bringing what you call the Green Revolution. But with that, it's also wiping our traditional seeds. Looking on incentives that were done by agricultural sectors or the government, like the incentive of a master farmer that was introduced around 1930, and some are still using. That was more of pushing our traditional seed away, and we left with nothing, and promoting only one type of seed, maize. And people were encouraged to grow that, maize and potato sometimes, encouraged to grow that, but driving our traditional seeds away. Seeds in that time has been eroded, and especially the traditional seed varieties were eroded because of the systems that are in place. Seed and hunger, economically, the Green Revolution was claiming that it's providing solution to hunger and poverty. But instead, you find in our communities in Southern Africa, you find there is lot and lot of people who are getting more poor and poorer because of the agricultural system that they are practicing. And because their traditional seed has gone away. Because whenever they need seed, they have to buy the seed from the same company that also supply the fertilizer and the pesticide. Then the people, they become poorer because their money is going somewhere where it's not invested back into their own community. So seeds issue, it's very political, and it's something that we need to look at in some way. Yeah. So this is very important to consider. But also in the current situation, we need to look at the formal commercial seed systems, where the seed has been controlled and monopolized, and it becomes like a property right for certain companies. Also, it becomes commodified and it becomes money-making business. And also, government position is not clear in terms of laws or in terms of the agreements around seeds, the breeding of seed. Who is the breeder? Is he the farmer, or is the licensed commercial person? Also, in the commercial sector, you find seed its only uniformity, where it's linear seed system, where monoculture is promoted, and there is no diversity. Funding goes to this type of commercial seed breeding, whilst the local community, they are not even given opportunity or support to do their multiplication or breeding of local seeds and sharing within their communities or other regions. Everything is controlled. Everything has to go to pass through the laws, and through that, we are losing lots of seeds. And hence, in Africa, we have lots of seeds that are lost. And to find them back, it's still a struggle, because even the gene bank, SADC gene bank, doesn't have the seeds. Even the country gene banks do not have the seeds. So some communities are now trying to share these seeds and multiply them within their own community. As a local farmer, you find that there is an advantage, and there is a current situation that we can encourage, like the diversity produced by local farmers. Local farmers, they don't practice monoculture. It has been just they were confused by the industrial agriculture, but most of them, they do not grow one type of crop. You find one person has over 15 to 50 variety of plants in one season. It's because they know that this will address nutrition security. And seed, it's taken as commons. It belongs to the community. It doesn't belong to individual. That's why in the past, seeds were not taken as a commodity or selling or buying it from someone, but people would swap the seeds and share the seeds. When I need the type of seed, I'll go with the one I have, and then I'll share the seeds with others. And then it become our thing, our community product, which was protected. But right now, we have crisis. And funding as well, it's quite a challenge, because the funding, it's going, as I say, more into the commercial side and forgetting our traditional farmers or our local farmers. It is also very important to recognize that there are some terms, I put it as future, but I'm going to go deeper into some of the activities that are there. It is important to know, when we are talking about seed, to work around the terms. What do we mean by indigenous seeds? What are those? And what do we mean by exotic seeds? What do we mean by open pollinated or hybrid, GMOs, farmer seeds, resilience, seed sovereign? What is it all about? Farmer rights, naturalized plants, so, and farmer breeding seeds. What is it all about, and how can we educate our community to know about these things? And how can our community know about seed certification? Is it important to go that route? Is it important to look at the seed trading? What is happening in that? Plant breeding, what is happening in plant breeding? And how can we have the right to do that as farmers? Diversity versus monoculture. Which approach or philosophy or technology that can make people sustainable? Is it monoculture or is it diversity? So for us, we promote diversity, because monoculture, it's all about reductionism, removing the right elements in a whole, and that leave us to struggle. Because if it's pest come into that, then it's a problem, because the plants can be wiped away because of monoculture. Public, commons or private laws. Seeds, is it something that we need to to consider that the government should put in policy and support the local people. Is it about commons? Is it about private? Is it about the law and making money? We need to question those things. Farmer seeds and climate change. What seeds are good to adapt in the climate change? Which is it the seed from Monsanto, from GMOs, or it's seed from our local varieties? If seed from our local varieties is the key, so why do we use the external seeds? Funding and collaboration, we need to do more research in finding out how can we make sure the farmers, our farmers, are doing the right thing and promote that and expand and introduce to other farmers. Seed availability and accessibility, economics and markets. Are we able to market? Are we able to access the variety of seed that we need? Or will we wait for the suppliers, like seed companies, to say this year we are planting this seed with this certain number? And further, they will say it's resistant to drought. It is resistant to climate change. It is. But once you do that, you grow that. The same seed, it gets weevils whilst it's in the field. The same seed, you cannot keep it seeds for the future. You have to go back to them every year. And then that's not sustainable. It's a breaking element within our soil. So we need to look on those areas. So who is the real seed breeder? Is it the farmer who has access to resources, who is breeding specifically for the market for big companies? Or is the farmer who is breeding for himself and share within the community? And they have, in this case, the local farmers have been doing this for many, many years. So who is the real breeder, the producer, the seed producer? And yeah, that's some of the things that we need to consider. Seed selection, identify, we need to look at how, when we are looking at seeds, we need to look at how to identify the healthy plants, select the largest fruit of a crop, make sure it is dried on the mother plant, harvest and keep the seeds under shade, select the healthiest seeds, mix the seeds with strong smelling plants, natural products like leaves of barks of barks of trees, wood ash, like the Barbegia is very good in repelling some pests, like the Lipia javanica is very good in repelling some pests. So examples, when you are working on the field, how do you isolate, how do you manage some crops in the field? For example, you can do isolation, staggering, intercropping. So in this case, we are saying the green one is the maize field, for example, mixed with other crops, as we do diversity. But the center plot, it's also the maize, but this maize, that's where you can get the good crop for seed. This is where you can get good seed, because you don't know the neighbor here, what is he growing? You don't know the other neighbor here, you don't know the other neighbor what is growing. So if we grow another type of maize, then pollution can come on this. So here, this one is protected from pollution. And this is how you can start working on how to save your own seeds. So when you have grown the seed, you can now look at saving the seeds. Like there are different methods of saving the seeds or storing the seeds. One, it's in the house. For example, here you say there's a smoke. People are cooking in their house, and then the smoke comes into the maize, and then the maize is protected from weevils, and then you can use this seed to grow for your during the specific season. So you remove the tip here and remove the back and take the middle one, and then you can use it. This can germinate. It's not rotten. It's still very live. So as you know, seed is a living element. So you can also, the smoke, you can also do grain earth pits. So you take, you dig in the ground and put a pot, and then put seeds in there and close in the soil, and that helps a lot in keeping seeds. You can also use granaries, and the granaries are in different forms. You can also use calabashes and clay pots to make sure that you can save seeds or keep seeds. So seeds can be kept in a like individual, like seed bank, individual seed bank. This is our farmer in Limpopo who is keeping seeds in his house, and you can see it's very traditional way of keeping house. All the empty bottles that are found around, he collects and keeps seeds in there. So seed is a bank to keep seeds for future use. An individual seed bank is when seeds are stored on a farm by individual farmer or households. So this is possible. We can do it, and we can start small, but at the end of the day, we can be able to bring back all the lost seeds through these systems. So the seeds can be at community seed banks, where this is also in Limpopo, where the farmer, they collect seed savings, whereby the village decided to form a cooperative for saving seeds, storage and sharing. So they know what seeds are in here and what seeds are kept for the future use. The seeds, the system is sometimes called the farmer-led seed system, which is a program or system that is driven by the community. The seeds will be circulated in the community, in the village, and also exchanged within other villages. And that helps to bring and to save seeds, local seeds. The collective seed saving could help the community to create a sovereign seed system. So if community, they start to take ownership in keeping their own seeds, what's the result? The result is that they can be able to conserve the seeds they need and to share with others on the seeds that are actually available in their own community. And they can also source some seeds from other communities, that seeds that are not in their own villages. So seeds, when you are keeping them, they might be attacked by insects, but you can use mixed seeds with the other plants like wood ash. You can use river sand, cooking oil, almond dung, strong smelling plants. Like on the left here, someone is grinding the stringer berries. It's an invasive plant, but it can be useful in keeping seeds safe from insects. Okay, this one was duplicated. Okay, so basically, this is what we are talking about, and we are saying the seeds can be kept and within our own communities, and it is us who can keep these seeds at all levels. We can multiply them and share with others whenever we need to share seeds. And this is just a duplicate of the future we anticipate around the seeds systems. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you so much, John, for that input. I'm going to hand straight over to Zayaan Khan. So Zayaan will present for about 20 minutes, and then we will have a question and answer session. So if you have any questions, please write them in the chat. Thanks, Zayaan.
Hi, everyone. I'm so new to the Zoom world. I somehow missed out on all these online courses and so on. So I've written some things, and I have some things that I'd like to share with everyone, and hopefully it'll take us to the 20 minutes. But knowing that John was going to discuss some of the methods of indigenous seed saving and storing, I thought I'd come with a little bit of a story, or a little bit more of a story around why these things are important. And hopefully in the question session, we can pull up some more practical things, or discuss more around what I'm about to tell you. So one of the first things, so thinking around seeds and our relationship to seeds and how seeds are so much a part of our ancestry as a species. This is kind of the crux of my research that is going into a PhD with the Environmental Humanities South at the University of Cape Town, around this idea of the way that we objectify seeds as opposed to being able to relate to seed. So from seed as object to seed as relation, right? And how we uncover all these thinkings, or how we go through all the ways that we objectify seeds, very much as John has alluded to, particularly with the seed laws and so on. But then also, what does that mean to relate to seeds? And in a time, especially in this like very visceral, fiery 2020, where social justice issues have been, you know, at the turn of every page and around every corner. How can we relate our work with seed to those kinds of important moments and times for change, and not just change, but change that is effective and permanent and transformative in the like true sense of the word transformative. So one of the issues that's very difficult for me, because my first language is English, as we were raised, is that we have such severe limitations of our words because of these colonial languages, and particularly English, where our understanding of the world is always through these very limited lenses of othering, or, you know, otherness. It's always kind of a binary, a versus. And we tend to refer to everything else that lives as if it is an it's. They even said it as an it's, right? Or so we refer to water or stone or land or the desert or the sea as it. And there's already this separation purely just in our language, in a very subconscious way that we think. And we do not consider these as alive, these beings, right? And then taking it to the level of plants, in the way that plants are classified in a more broader sense around the usage of Latin as the main language, as the hooftaal, and the limitations of Latin languages speaking to this idea of scientific compartmentalization, and not the notion or the understanding of indigenous togetherness. We refer to plants by what science groups them together for, and not because of an understanding we have for that interconnectedness. And some of you have heard me talk about this before, but this is a good example that I'd like to give, is we can use or understand what I mean by this word buchu. And so buchu, if everybody knows what buchu is, it's you know, it's also quite a political plant because it's so loved by pharmaceutical companies and export. But it is a family, the buchu that I kind of mostly identify is in the family Agathosma, which is part of Rutaceae, it's part of the citrus family. And one of the kind of predispositions of this family is that it smells very strong. So this is some dried buchu. It's quite a big leaf comparatively. And if you could consider, if you were holding this leaf in your hand, you would see that it's full of very big oil glands that you can very much see. And it's very strong, even though this is probably about 3 years old, already dried, 2017, right? But at the same time, we have this plant that is called, in Latin, Collionema. In Afrikaans and more colloquially, we call it aasbos, which means like bait bush. But it's also called Cape May because it looks very similar to the European May. and it's also called confetti. This has been plucked a few days ago, but you can maybe see some of these white flowers. They look like confetti, especially when the flowers have fallen and the ground is like strewn with these flowers. This is also called buchu. It's not the same family, but it's a cousin. And the reason it's also called buchu is because the smell is very strong, and it smells very similar to, or for me at least, to that smell of like floor polish. Very strong. But then you also get this, right? Not the bowl, just this. And this is what's colloquially called dassie piss, which is basically, so dassies, the hierarchs, right? They live in groups, and they tend to use one area of where they stay. They reside in the same space for many generations. That space that they use as their toilet basically gets used over and over again for many generations, to the point that it often crystallizes. So this is crystallized urine basically. And the hyrax, I stand corrected, but it has these kind of musk glands, so that when it does go to the bathroom, the smell is very potent, and it's the kind of smell, I don't know if they still use it in perfumery, but it's used in perfume. So it's a very potent smell, but a nice smell, not like particularly disgusting or anything. And this is used as medicine. It's very sweet. And it's also called buchu because the word buchu means strong smelling. All right, so just to understand this idea of indigenous language systems and the way that we name things and the power that names have over the things that we give them, you know? So in this connectivity of understanding naming and having these relationships with these plants and many other beings that live with us, we incite this, you know, kind of deeply cultural and, I don't know, what I call like a spiritual politic with everything else that lives with us, but also from the way that we engage from ourselves out into the world, especially around what the land teaches us. And those of us who work in this field around with food and with land can attest to this, but I think we're in a time where we require a much deeper interrogation into the self and that work. So it's really about how the natural world is not separate from us, very much part of who we are, that we come from, and that seed, like many other lives and beings, have evolved us, right? And continue to do so. So seed as a genetic package, seed as a living being in the world is much more ancient than we are as a species, so in evolutionary context. Okay, so our relationship with cultivation goes back really to the very beginning of our ancestry as a species, where, for example, food was collected and brought back to the home space, let's say a cave, and these foods were then cleaned and processed, and a lot of the residual material would be used for bedding. But then oftentimes a lot of the afal, base afal, like the seeds and the inner parts of plants, would get discarded outside the dwellings, and they would often take root, and plants would grow over time, and making food access easier because now the foods are growing outside the dwelling. Shorter trips together, passing this knowledge on to others, particularly children, and those that, you know, we raise, ends up being a lot more of a lot more fluid or quicker way of knowledge sharing, of inheritance. And I'd also just like to take a moment to say thank you to my friend Zayaan Khan, who we have had countless discussions around our history, our general species history, and seeds. So seed also plays an integral part of our cultural acts, and also the way in which we engage in the world and with each other, for sure. And it might not be obvious to us, but seed is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. It's so ubiquitous that perhaps it is invisible, right? But if you consider the breakfast you ate this morning, whether it was the coffee or the bread, or if you consider the clothing that you were wearing, the cotton, for example, or the linens, or all these, you know, and also in our homes as well. So many of what we know come from seed, the paper that we use, etc. And this inherent relationship with seed that goes back millennia is also very well integrated and enwrapped in our many, many stories of creation around the world. And this kind of seed plays such an integral role in our identities. And so, but then because so many of us kind of lie in the in-betweens, what Gloria and Zaldua calls the Nepantla spaces, you know, the borders, those of us who are not quite indigenous and not quite of a dominant peoples, where we have what we also call kind of the spectrum of queerness, which is not to do with our gender or sexuality, but with our identity. And those of us who are of something of the in-betweens, right? Where there isn't this very vividly taught inheritance of what our knowledge is, where our knowledge has been usurped and taken by forced removal, apartheid systems, colonialism, shame, imperialism, all of those very real things. What can we do? And so there are so many steps that we can take around land and our recognition of land, and more particularly our role within this. But I wish to interrogate or introduce, but encourage, I guess, a new direction before we interrogate our rights to land or to seed or general access. I wish us to take the moment to look at the ways that we use seed, like really look at the ways that we use seed, the ways that we have used seed, the ways that many of us in our lineages have traveled with seed, whether it's been braided in hair or hemmed into clothing, or put inside an instrument to carry across the seas or to cross the lands. And I want us to acknowledge the ways that we use seed, whether it's for jewelry, whether it's for using, you know, as teething devices for teething babies, as musical instruments, as storage vessels, as color for our paper, for our clothing, so many things. So, and as John has told us, with it being that our very rights with seed or access to seed is at risk, and our access is limited with so many patents and corporatization governing our systems, even our knowledge systems. I think that understanding our food systems and our seed systems through the lens of indigenous knowledge and indigenous systems helps to create this practice that has a broader awareness, particularly of the self, and to be insightful to the self, where humility is such a part of that system, and that sense of authenticity can flourish. So there's a sense of freedom in the way that we work, and to also be constantly navigating the way that we compartmentalize seed. And so to give an example of this, and one of the reasons why I started down this journey was because of these patents and because of these laws governing not just our continent, but the world. There was such a rhetoric or a discussion around farmers' rights and the knowledge of seed in terms of food and sometimes medicine, but the narrative was around food. And there was so much struggle, there is so much struggling and so much hardship, yet so many people whose entire lives kind of depend on this system that farmers have created over millennia are completely and still remain completely oblivious to the issues at hand. And so thinking along the borders or around us, the outside of these spaces where we're all, in a sense, we all have responsibility and we're all engaging in the system. There has to be a way that we can open up the outsides a little bit and create this inspiration and create a sense of hope for others to get involved in seed work, and not just for cultivation, because there are so many people, amazing farmers and producers who are cultivating, but also to think around what other cultural engagements we have with seed. Like I said, for example, with instruments, there are so many plants that naturally just allow that for us, you know, to tie a whole bunch of seed around our ankles and dance. To consider the very architectural natures that a lot of seed has and continues to have, and the very intricate relationships that they have with pollinators and with other species, where the very act of their reproduction, that the sexual act and the nature that plants have is so intertwined with a multi-species, with so many other different species that they rely on to proliferate and to create more of themselves. I know that we have some time left, but I think that's pretty much it from me, Jane. So if there are maybe some questions, or if someone also has something to offer towards this conversation.
That's really great. Thank you so much, Zayaan. We're really grateful that you could join us and share with us. And yeah, I really always enjoy your presentations, and your take on Indigenous knowledge and seed and food is really fascinating and refreshing and informative. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
So, sure. So as I said in the beginning, we do have some time for questions. If you do have any, please write them in the chat and then we will answer them. But before I get there, I just want to share, as we've done in previous workshop, we've shared some of the tools that we've developed. And so the one tool that we have developed, which John actually helped us to write, is the Seed Saving Activist Guide. And I'm just going to quickly share this with you, and I will share the link. So it's Advancing Food Sovereignty Through Seed Saving, an Activist Guide, and then I'll just show you some of the contents. And a lot of it is what Zayaan and John have spoken about. Understanding seeds, the cycle of seeds, the importance of saving seeds in the South African seed system, seed saving food sovereignty, and then there's a section on seed saving principles and practice, where there's a few of the techniques. So if you want to read more about that, and then there's a section on how to set up a household or community seed bank. So please use that tool. It is available on the SAFSI website, and I will share the link in the chat right now. Okay, so we're going back to questions and comments. I'm just going to look at the chat. So the first question we had was from Janet, and this is for John. John, regarding seed banks for food crops, do you know of examples in South Africa where a seed cooperative has been set up, i.e. with a bit of scale as a business? MST in Brazil has a big seed cooperative. So John, are you aware of any of these seed co-ops in South Africa?
Yeah, okay. Yes, in Limpopo, we have to set up, we have the communities themselves setting up seed work. We do not actually call them cooperatives, but we call them the community hubs that we are trying to create. And then within those community hubs, that's where we have the communities bringing seed together and saving the seeds. That's mainly in Limpopo. And also together with the Department of Agriculture, there is a seed bank that has been set in Limpopo also, that also brings in different people into the program, the local people to form a cooperative. So that's what I know so far in Limpopo. I don't know if there are other examples in other provinces in South Africa.
Thank you, John. And perhaps there's other on this call who do know where, if there are any co-ops in South Africa, please write in the chat if you do know. Those are seed co-ops. And then we have two questions for you, Zayaan. So the first one is from Andre, and he's saying, we are producing some indigenous songs and teaching youth, and can you present or give our youth a lesson on making a simple seed instrument, please? And then a second question from Lucy is asking, are you encouraging people to use or make use of seeds for human interest, i.e. musical, clothes, etc.? Or should we respect these and keep them for their main reason, i.e. going back to nature and land for proliferating themselves as their normal cycle of life, not to have humans disturbing their cycle? Zayaan.
Thanks for the questions, Lucy and Andre. Andre, the musical instrument stuff is it might be one of my favorite parts, because it's, especially with children, because it is such a immediately kind of gratifying space to work in, especially if you consider that different seeds make different sounds, and you are able to then, you could create a whole orchestra of seed, you know, whether it's, we made a whole lot of instruments, for example, here in the Cape with dried out kelp, and filling them with different kinds of seed, and not, you know, the kind of seed that you can literally get in the supermarket, dry rice, different kinds of lentils, beans, so things that children could technically have access to, and you know, there's a huge discussion around food and the agency of children, and children being able to from their own kind of access food, etc. But this is one of the ways that you can have those discussions and engage with children around it. So it's lots of fun, but also just to be, I'm not sure where you're based, but when it is various seed seasons where you live, to pick the seed up and see what sound it makes. A lot of seed here within the Capes, the West Cape, so the Western Cape and the Northern Cape, a lot of seeds have this name klappertjies, because when the wind blows and the seed pod often splits apart like that, then you have this kind of clapping, and as they knock together, they make this beautiful sound. So a lot of seeds or plants are named because of how they sound. But I mean, wherever you go, you know, there's so many seeds that even the ones that are not indigenous, that make sound. And so I think the whole objective of it is to be kind of aware of how many differences there are with that act of making sound, the softness of it, the hardness of it, the loudness of it, and to create these instruments with children themselves, even if it's in a toilet paper roll. But yes, I'm happy to share lots of insights and come chat and so on. It's really, I really enjoy to do these things. And then Lucy, I think it's, you know, it's not hard and fast, but it's really more around the acknowledgement, first of all, that what we are doing comes from seed. And that, because that's often kind of left at the wayside, like, you know, we create things as if it's the beginning of that creation, but meanwhile, this plant has evolved over absolute millennia with very many changing climates and environments. And so I think, or if I can say, the main starting point, I think, is to acknowledge the acknowledgement, because that comes from that place of humility, with the recognition that the world is much older than we are, and the world is not made for us, it's made for everything, you know, like with this continuously cyclical nature of giving and forgiving. But also to say that the idea of going back to nature, or this idea of letting nature lie, is also in the indigenous way of thinking flawed, because we are nature and we are of nature. And that's why this talk about humility and acknowledgement is so important, because it then doesn't supersede one species above the other, or make ourselves more important than any other. And so I think that and the last thing I want to say about that is the creative development of anything, whether it's a recipe or any of the cultural uses that we engage with and we have in the world. I think it's very important that we continue to do so, because all of these things are co-evolution. And often when you start in the spaces of cultivation, and hopefully people who are foraging, for example, part of the reciprocity is that you continue to throw seed, continue to help and aid in pollination, to continue to kind of allow those spaces to thrive and never to take too much, because a lot of cultivation encourages growth. And I mean, I've seen it multiple times, you know, so to not be afraid to do those things, but to acknowledge is basically what I'm trying to say.
Thank you so much, Zayaan. And then we have a comment here, not so much a question, and this may be in response to Janet's question. Busisiwe is saying, in the Eastern Cape at Kuzini, King Williamstown, through Elizwi Lamafama, I just lost it, and Zingisa NGO, there's a community seed bank. A lot of farmers have their own family seed banks, or individual seed banks, as John called them. So thanks for that, Busisiwe. And then, okay, there's some comments coming in here. Okay, so Andre sent his contacts. Okay, so a question from Godfrey. Zayaan, you mentioned Dasypus. I grew up with that and another rock called Klipsweet, Duivelsdraak, and Dupa. Are these still available?
Godfrey, is it not the same? I'm not sure. I only know this as Dasypus because this is how I learned it in the Northern Cape. And everybody called it that there, and we made tea out of it and we drank it as a tonic. But I'm thinking like it does, I'm not sure about the other ones. I am going to find out, and I'll try to get a hold of you and see if that's correct. But I'll put it in my hat and carry it with me.
Thanks, Zayaan. If there's no more questions, I'll just give it a few moments for any more questions. In the meantime, John or Zayaan, do you have anything to add at this point? We are going to wrap up really soon. We have 6 more minutes. John, do you have any comments based on some of the questions?
No, thank you. Yeah, it was all covered. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Okay, there's.
Andre, I'll definitely contact you. It's close to where I stay.
Great. And then there's just some comments about making musical shakes with rice and lentils in a cool drink can. That's great. So, Zayaan, anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, I'm okay. It's just been very fun for me to share. So thank you everybody for your inputs also.
Thank you, Zayaan. It's been really great having you, and thanks again to John. And just to say thank you to everyone else who's joined us. This has been a really wonderful series, and I've enjoyed hosting it. And so thank you for participating in this series, for all your questions and comments, and also your positive feedback. We hope that these workshops have given you the information that you've been looking for, and that you will be able to bear fruit with this knowledge and also pass on this knowledge. And then once again, a big thank you for John for always bringing us such valuable lessons and insights at each of these workshops. Also, thank you to Courtney for working behind the scenes, sharing the links, and also doing social media to get the events out there. And thanks again to Zayaan for joining us today. And as I said, this is our last workshop for this year. We might have a series next year where we'll be looking at setting up a food sovereignty hub. So please stay in touch with us. We'll share that on our Facebook and social media pages. And then just to say to everyone, keep safe and enjoy working in your gardens and closing the loop. And please do reach out to us if you have any questions. All right, thanks everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.